Okay. Let's see. Where's my share? Oh, come on. There it is. All right. Um, go. Actually, why don't you go ahead and ask your questions, Neil?
Okay, real quick. Okay, so I'm I don't know if you said it this is it West Way and East Way or West Side?
West about, and
West.
east about.
Okay, so you said you really want to go east about. Well, but so I just read the wager. It's about a British fleet that went west about, not to good results. And in fact, many bad things happened. When they tried to go around the Horn into from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And so people had trouble doing that. But then, of course, whalers did it. And, I mean, that was the 1740s, and the whalers did it, and the clipper ships did it. So, how does talk about those winds, and did they just learn better about how to get around there, or what's the deal?
No, no. It was really miserable, and I think there's a record of something like 3 or 4 months for a square rigger to get around the Horn. I don't know it off the top of my head, but if you Google what is the record longest time it took to get around the Horn, it's astonishing. I mean, it really is months. Like, in other words, guys sitting down there trying to go against the trade winds. Well, those aren't the trade winds. Those are the easterlies. Excuse me, the westerlies that are down above latitude, say 35, both north and south. Are we say higher latitudes when they're like in the 30s and 40s above the equator, which is zero, right? So a high latitude can be either at the North Pole or South Pole. When you get up there, it's easterlies, and so when you're down uh, at Cape Horn, they are going against the wind, and they're square riggers in those days, and uh, they can't go to windward. They can only go about 60 degrees to windward. And they did go to windward, but they were just real slow about it, and they had to. So that's what happened. They just got stalled down there, beating their brains out trying to go to the west against the wind. The wager is a bunch of. That's a huge clusterfuck from the top down. Everybody that had anything to do with that is an idiot. And I mean, it's the book is written like it's a big tragedy. I see it as a big, you know, a big exercise in how stupid you can be. But they were terrible. Say, I mean, the whole thing was just obnoxious. What's your next question,
Okay,
Mister
so
D?
the next question is one of the sailors talked about 3 meter swells, and I imagine you probably get 10 meter swells. So I'm gonna say I'm in Maverick, and I got swells that are like 20, 30 feet high, and they're coming in all directions. How does one do that? I mean, do you just get pushed around, or are you just like a little cork on the waves, or how does that work?
Uh, you can. The highest we saw were 20 feet, and we saw those probably 3 or 4 times. The first thing you do is avoid hurricanes. There's something I don't know if I discussed this. There's something called a fully developed sea (FDS), and that means if you have like say 20 knots. At 20 knots, if it blows, I don't have the. There's a chart, a spreadsheet or a graph. Uh, if you have 20 knots of wind and it blows across the sea for say 50 miles for 10 hours, then what you get is what's called a fully developed sea. And the waves aren't going to get any higher than that given that wind strength and that what they call fetch, which is the distance across which the wind is blowing. That's why when you want to anchor someplace, you anchor in the lee so that like the wind is coming over the island. Remember, I was talking about Tahiti last time. The
Mhm.
wind normally was coming from the east, and so you were protected because we were on the western side of Tahiti. But then it turned around and blew from the east. So then what happens is you're on what's called a lee shore, and you're being driven towards the shore, which is very close to you. But if the wind is the other direction, the wind doesn't have enough time to build up any seas between the shore and you. So that's where you want to anchor. Um, yeah, like so the biggest seas we saw were about 20 feet, and it makes a lot of difference whether they're in front of you or behind you. Um, they were in front of us in coming up the Red Sea for a bit. Somebody got hurt on that little experience, but we survived. There's ways of dealing with this, and then there was two times when we coming out of Bora Bora we had 20 footers, and then coming out of the Canaries, I'll get to that. We had 20 footers, and that was by plan. Actually, we wanted to use the wind to go someplace fast, but we'll get to that. So, what's your next question?
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So,
no, no,
so
you get killed. You get your brains beat in. That's
oh,
what
okay. So
happens.
you're just
And you,
bobbing. You're just like a
yeah, and
cork.
you can't sleep for a couple of 3 days.
Oh, okay. And so and at night, how do you not? I guess you just point in the direction you want to go, and you just hope you don't run into something, right?
This is a very common question. No, you can't just you can't anchor. It's 2 feet. It's 2 feet. It's 2 miles deep in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's no place to anchor. So you just keep going. No, we had at sea. You have somebody on watch 24 hours a day. So there's always somebody awake. And we what we did the traditional thing is 4 hour watches.
Yeah.
Uh, and by the way, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. God, I just don't get me started on all this stuff. On a 4 hour watch, what they do is they ring a bell after a half hour. That's one bell. And then they ring two bells at 1 hour. And after 4 hours, they ring eight bells. And then your watch is done. Well, this is also used for the traditional sailor's funeral at sea or to celebrate like I did it, I've done it a couple of times for people who wanted to spread the ashes of someone at sea, and I would get a ship's bell and ring it 8 times. And the significance of that is your watch is over. Uh, and we had, however, we use 6 hour watches. I've done passages where it's 4 hours and you just never feel rested. But 6 hours is pretty good, with a little nap, you feel pretty good all day. And the problem with a longer watch is that you um, tend to fall asleep. And you you really don't want to fall asleep if you're near land or near anything. That's a very and you could be asleep for 2 hours and easily time enough to die, which happens. So what we did was we had 6 hour watches, but you would have a kitchen timer, which we rigged up lanyards. So you put them around your neck, and if you start to feel droopy, you set the kitchen timer for 15 minutes, and you take a little power nap. And then you wake up and look around, look at the radar, and then if you need to, you can take another one or two of those. The reason it's 15 minutes is because if you do the math, if you see a big ship on the horizon, it takes about, I mean, that's conservative. It takes about 20 minutes at their cruising speed. If they're coming straight towards you and you're coming towards them, it takes about 20 minutes for them to run you down. So the idea is that if you look around every 15 minutes and look at the radar, you're probably okay. So that's how that's dealt with.
Tony, do you know the only, as far as I know, the only land church in the world that rings its bells by ship bells?
No.
It's in Wellfleet, Massachusetts on Cape Cod.
Well, that makes sense.
Huh.
So that so they ring it like, in other words, they would ring it maybe 8 times at noon and then once at 12:30
Yep.
and twice at 1, something like that.
And
Yeah,
eight
the
times, eight
the
times at 4 o'clock and 8 times at 8 o'clock.
we're gonna be. I'm never gonna get through this, but anyway, they dropped the balloon on a New Year's Eve. That comes from Greenwich. That's what they used to do so that all the mariners could start their timepieces according to Greenwich Mean Time. So that was originally done, and it still is done at Greenwich, England. Did I say Connecticut? You know, to
No.
get Greenwich Mean Time. That's why, and that's what we use internationally. Peter, do you have something?
Yeah, if you're sailing alone, obviously you can't post the watch while you're asleep. So that would seem to be one of the most dangerous things about sailing alone.
Well, totally, and also it's illegal. According to the COREGs, which are the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea, you have to have somebody on watch at all times. Rule number 5: you have to always have somebody on watch. And if somebody were to run you down when you were asleep, you would share. Even if you had right away technically because you're a sailboat, but if they ran you down and you were asleep, you would share liability for that. That wouldn't be totally on them, even if they should have avoided you. However, the what these guys that, like I say, only 200 people or so have ever sailed around the world alone, uh, non-stop unassisted. The people that have done it alone and stopped, there's a bigger number, but even so, the thing is that the sea is so huge that the likelihood of you getting run down by something is very small until you get like close to the Panama Canal or some choke point like that. The sea is unimaginably large. It's like, if you imagine walking across the United States, which is nowhere near as big as the Pacific Ocean, and imagine how likely it is that you'd run into somebody walking across in the other direction. It's a gigantic area, so the chances are very small. Uh, okay, I'm gonna we left off. We'd gone through the Torres Strait, the boys, and we were gonna head into the Muslim world. I just asked Teresa today. I said, she went down and visited. So did Caroline. Came down and visited us in Darwin, and I just asked her, do you remember ever telling me, hey, I don't want you to do this? Because everybody was freaking out about Muslims, and didn't you ever worry about me? And she said, nah, um, or something to that effect. Uh, However, Lloyd's of London, which was our insurance underwriter, canceled our insurance for everything between Australia and the Mediterranean after 9/11, and I thought that was bullshit because already in the insurance policy it says that we were not indemnified against acts of war or terrorism. So apparently Lloyd's thought that I was so freaked out I was just going to run into some land because of the Muslim terror. But so they canceled our insurance, and just like the scam I talked about, I think I talked about it in Indonesia. This just turned out to be a scam from Lloyd's to get more money out of us. So I think they eventually just doubled our premium or something. And so cough up some money, pal. Even though they were already protected, it kind of, well, I would say it pissed me off, except there were so many other things to worry about. It was a big deal. Okay, so anyway, here's the progress here. We're in Darwin, and we headed. The next stop was in Bali. That was about 1,000 miles, I think. And Bali is just wonderful. I don't think I need to expand on how wonderful it is. It's just so exotic and weird in a fun way, and they're not unaware of their appeal to the wider world in Bali. It's very exotic, but it's also something that is a prime destination for travelers around the world. So anyway, we went to Bali next. That was just great. This is I think the barong dance in Bali. We saw two or three of those, and they're very strange. It's weirder than watching Star Trek or anything. These dances, because they have something called gamelan music, and gamelan scale. Like if you take an eight, those of you who are musicians, if you take a typical octave. It's divided into just on the white keys 8 notes, but the gamelan band has one kind of instrument that's divided into 7, and another instrument that's divided into 9 notes, and they're playing at the same time. It's a very weird sound. I think it's 7 and 9. I have a book on it that I got. It's so weird. But anyway, wonderful too. These are two of the Balinese dancers, and I'm sure they just hate this. American tourists, take your picture with this stupid white guy. But there they are. Lovely little ladies. This is also Bali, though. It's not all just wonderful and weird. It's a little crowded and just a wonderful place, though. This is Terry eating the durian fruit. I don't know if you've ever heard of the durian fruit, but it smells like a rotting corpse. And Terry was brave enough to eat anything. But unfortunately, he also bought one which stunk up Maverick's cabin for a week. I did not indulge in the durian. This is a local boat because they like art. I thought I'd show you this. This is, you maybe have heard of an anvil-headed, this is a thunderstorm seen from space. And they have often described as having an anvil head, and this is why. That flat table on the top of it is where the troposphere meets the stratosphere, and the condensed air that's risen vertically from the surface of the ocean is now being blown sideways by the winds of the stratosphere. This is the same thing except from sea level, and this is in the Pacific Ocean, and it's just blown by us. You can see that I have a hatch open. I'm sitting there looking forward. So it is going away from us right now, and so we open up the hatches again. This one is what it looks like in the Java Sea. The Java Sea has the most powerful and frequent thunderstorms of any place on Earth, and so now that we're in the Java Sea, after we left Bali, we were in the Java Sea. And that thing is coming our way, and it starts to look like that, and then in 10 minutes, you've got 65 knot winds. In other words, hurricane force winds. And the good news is it only blows for about 45 minutes, and so it does occasion a change of underwear, but it otherwise if you reduce sail quick enough, you'll be okay and survive this. We got kind of used to dealing with this sort of thing in the Java Sea, but these they would rip the sails off your boat if you weren't vigilant. Okay, so but these guys are out. I took this an hour later. These guys are out in the same ocean as me, and they just endured the same storm, and they're laughing away, and they don't have any safety gear whatsoever. They don't have any life vests. They don't have any tethers. They don't have they have a bilge pump, you can see here. They're pumping their boat, but they don't have a radio to call for help. And it's, you might think they're stupid, but no, it's quite the opposite. They have survived for generations with no more safety support than you see right there. And these guys. Anyway, this is the next bunch of trouble we got in, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you'll remember we went aground in Tahiti, and so we were okay. The trip from Bali to Singapore is about 1,000 miles with a stop in Borneo to see the orangutans. By the way, orangutan just means somebody that lives, a guy who lives in the jungle. It can be a human being. I think that's so funny. The Indonesian language, like, yeah, he's an orangutan. He lives out in the jungle by himself. Peter.
Okay.
When European sailors first saw orangutans around 1697, they seem to have thought they were human.
Yeah, well, they're probably more human than some of us.
Well,
Um, the by the way, you guys, if Peter just raised his hand, I don't necessarily always see all you guys in the panel because they don't show Zoom doesn't show me all the other faces. So again, just speak up if you got a question, as Peter did. Okay, so this is a what happened was we were supposed to get 1,000 miles of fairly mellow conditions. If you remember, I showed you that pilot chart from last time about how we plan these passages. And this is supposed to be mellow for 1,000 miles, and it was not anything like that. It was 35 to 45 on the nose all the way, 1,000 miles, and we just were got our brains beat out. And there was a bunch of us going up there, and some people didn't make it for a variety of reasons. But we just at one point, this is what this is a chart going into a port in Borneo, and we decided we'd had enough and wanted to rest for a while, so we started to go down this channel. These little numbers all over the chart are soundings, and I believe this is in meters. We get the soundings in meters, feet, and fathoms. So that's even in America they do it. Despite Ronald Reagan's opposition to the metric system, we have our government publishes these in feet, meters, and fathoms. You can't pick what you want. I think maybe electronically now you can, but anyway. So these are like you're seeing. I believe you're seeing meters here. So you see half a meter. That means, you know, 15 inches or something. So it's very shallow. And then you have this channel going in. You see so it's only about 10 feet deep in the channel even. And these are lights. The buoy system in America and both Americas and the Philippines is red right returning. So the right side of the channel is marked by red buoys, and the left by green buoys. However, in the rest of the world, it's green buoys on the right and red buoys on the left, just to make your life interesting. So this is one of the, if you can see, I don't know if you can see this right here, but this says FLR 5 seconds. What that means is a flashing red buoy every 5 seconds. And it's on the left side, not the right side. So anyway, this is a bit confusing. And to add to the confusion, there is a current of about 2 knots going from left to right and a breeze of about 20 knots going from left to right. So in order to drive down this channel, we had to aim about 25 degrees to the left to crab down the channel so that we'd be in the channel, and we didn't successfully avoid going aground. So here's the second time in our trip that we're going to go aground. And you're in Borneo, in some completely remote, weird area of Borneo where they don't speak English. And so there was no helping us. So what you have to do is launch the dinghy, get the engine on the dinghy. Then what you do is take a spare anchor out to deeper water, and 150 feet out towards deeper water, set the anchor, and then you use your winch and your own muscle power to drag yourself across the mud until you're back afloat. And I think we had to do that twice. I think we were 300 feet of ground, and I could explain how that happened. But basically, it's a result of the fact that the current and wind are taking you to the right and driving you further ashore every second. And we were also bouncing up and down on the bottom in a very violent way, which scared the crap out of me. I thought the boat was going to fall apart. Anyway, we finally got off, and the thing is, we were really tired. That's why we were going into this port, was we were really tired and want some rest. And we said, okay, forget it. And we just headed out to deeper water, and we never got our rest. And so we just headed up the road. So chasing, that was an afternoon of terror. We also had on our mind the fact that when we were, I think it was someplace in the South Pacific, of somebody we knew. That's called kedging off. Is what it's kedging off is when you drop an anchor and crank yourself back to deep water. And somebody we knew did that back in South Pacific, and they got their boat off, but they had a heart attack and died. So we were thinking about that, you know. Okay, so now we're in Borneo, a town called Kumai, and this little lady here is this. This is a fun story. She's Muslim. It's the middle of Ramadan now, and it's this is the biggest Muslim country in the world, Indonesia. And so we're at this little shop, and she says, where are you guys from? And we said, America. And she said, well, are you Christians? And this is a tribal question, really, not so much a theological question. And there's no fudging it. You're either a Christian, you're either a Muslim or you're not, basically. And so I said, yeah. And so she said, are we enemies then? And remember, this is just after 9/11. This is probably 3 or 4 weeks after 9/11. And she says, well, are we enemies? And I said, I can't really feel like I'm your enemy, you know. I don't, you know. You can feel whatever you want, but I don't feel like I'm your enemy. And she said, well, are you afraid? And I said, no, I don't really feel afraid. I have to admit, maybe I'm dumb, but should I feel afraid? And she says, yes. Oh boy. And she's just, with a sweet smile, she said yes. But these guys were right around the corner, and they didn't look very scary at all. This is, okay, so we got up to this town of Kumai, which is a river town. We got a guide to go take us up the river because it's got a lot of shallows. And the same guide, a guy named Gilong, who I'll show you in a minute, he arranged for this boat because you can't take Maverick. We wanted to go up the rivers to see the orangutans, and we couldn't take Maverick, so he arranged for this boat. And we, in the meantime, back in Papua New Guinea, we'd made friends with these guys. This is Francis, who's a Fijian, and this is Paul, who's from California. These guys, man, we were really good pals with these guys. However, like, for example, when they got anchored here, it's the middle of Ramadan. Within about an hour, they had arranged for a bottle of whiskey, an ounce of pot, and hookers. And all of these are probably death sentence. You can't do that in the middle of Ramadan in a Muslim country. Like, from dusk to dawn, you heard the Quran being chanted from the what do they call it? Anyway, all night. And so these guys are just crazy. Anyway, they got away with it. So this is Gilong, who was our guide. Gilong had about a fourth-rate education, but he was no fool. He knew 3 languages and just a very pleasant guy. And he's the guy that arranged for this boat and then took us up the river to see the orangutans. This is Gilong. This is him showing you how to use a blowpipe. And 6 months before we had gotten there, just about the time we left California, there had been a war with. There was a group called the Madurans. They were from a nearby island, and not that nearby, but anyway, they had a bunch of them had moved to Borneo and made themselves unwelcome. And eventually, they were doing, petty crime and stuff like that. Eventually, they raped a Dayak girl. This is a Dayak, is the native tribe here in Borneo. And this prompted a war which killed a bunch of the Madurans, and they killed them using a blowpipe like this with a poison dart. This is how these guys hunt monkeys in Borneo. And Geelong was one of the guys who was one of the murderers killing these guys. And then they would, they, Geelong is just telling me all this stuff. Yeah, he says, and then if you'd never killed anybody before, you had to drink the blood of the guy you killed so that his ghost wouldn't haunt you. And then they also, no, that was so you'd gain his strength. And they also chopped their heads off, and that was, and performed some kind of ritual so that the ghost wouldn't haunt you. Oh my God. So what do you say? You're just sitting around with this guy having a drink, and he tells you this story. What is the proper Miss Manners response when somebody tells you a story like that? I couldn't think of anything to say. Well, oh well, right on, man, or
Oh, wow.
what are you supposed to say? Anyway, this is Geelong. Otherwise, a completely pleasant guy. And this is a male orangutan. They take you out in the jungle, and they know all the guides. They know the orangutans by name. It's very funny. And there's only one dominant male that'll show up to get the food because the males don't tolerate one another. But I think for most people, this would be kind of a thrill to see an orangutan in the wild. And then there's females around. Okay. Moving on, so this is where Kumai was on Borneo. Borneo is now called Kalimantan, but it's still called Borneo. So then up to Singapore, and then to Phuket is where our trip took us. And so this is let's see, Phang Bay off of Phuket in Thailand, and some of the James Bond movies were filmed there. It's pretty wonderful. And there's Maverick anchored up there in Phang Bay. And I like this picture because it shows you what we get to do as cruisers. Because this kind of place has tourists during the day. They have tourist boats. But we get to anchor and just hang out and have this whole area completely to ourselves. It's just excellent, except for the crabs. I mean, the crabs are fine. I just mean that they're the only guys there besides us. So after that, we left Phuket, which is just off the map here, and we went across the Bay of Bengal to Sri Lanka, and then the Maldives, and then across the Arabian Sea to Oman. And so this is our only pirate adventure, was off of Sri Lanka. We were, I write about this in the book, and I don't think I can do as well. I'm a better writer than I am a talker, which isn't saying much, but this is a true story. We get off of Sri Lanka, there's no wind. I'm driving, we're motoring along, and all of a sudden this big 30-foot fishing boat comes roaring up to us with about 8 guys on board. Now, this wasn't that unusual because fishermen had come up and tried to sell you fish and crabs and stuff like that, and it was no big deal, except these guys weren't friendly. It was really clear, obvious from the get-go. They were not friendly, and they wanted to get on board, and that was really weird. The guys never asked to get on board. So it was clear what this was. These guys were, quote, pirates, although they weren't the professional types. The professional types, they get tankers and stuff. They'll have a guy who can actually captain a tanker, and they'll repaint the ship. I mean, it's quite elaborate. And this is kind of elaborate too, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, so I'm standing there driving along, and these guys come up, and I go, oh my God, we're all going to die. And Terry is down in the cabin, and Terry, he comes out just as happy, smiling, cheerful, and he acts like Forrest Gump. He acts like a guy who has no brains. He has the development of a 5-year-old, and he asks them if it's if that's a fishing boat and if they have any fish and is it fun being a fisherman? Can I get on your boat? And do you have any candy? I mean, you wouldn't think an adult person could pull that off, but he does. And they're all looking at him like, oh my God, this poor son of a bitch. They're looking at him like, how can we hurt this guy? He's just this innocent little child, with in a man's body. And they just went away. I could not believe it. Uh, I don't know how Terry thought of that or pulled it off. We'd never talked about this before. But anyway, that was our pirate experience. Not very exciting, no violence. Anyway, then we went to the Maldives, which is also Muslim. India, of course, is Sri Lanka. Well, that's a whole other story, but Sri Lanka is Hindu mostly. Maldives are Muslim, though. So then we get close to Oman, and we have something. I came up out of the cabin, and the sea was, in the middle of the night, the sea was white from horizon to horizon. And it was just very surreal. It looked like you were on top of a bunch of clouds. And I yelled at Terry. I said, "Man, you got to see this." So he wakes up and he looks around, and we both couldn't believe it. It was just so weird. And I didn't know what it was, but when I got back, I wrote about this, and when I got back, an oceanographer contacted me and wanted to know the exact Latin long and time of when that occurred, because what he was doing was surveying all the satellite records and trying to coordinate them with reports of this kind of thing. Because what this was a bloom of bioluminescent dinoflagellates, and it's like a red tide, except it's bioluminescent. And I don't know how many of you have actually seen the individual bioluminescence. They have trips up here in Tomales Bay where you can go out in the middle of the night. But the old timers call them sea stars, and they just look like little things that are maybe a quarter inch in diameter, and they just, when you stick an oar in the water, they'll light up, so you might have 20 of them light up or something like that. And in our case, and this is all around the world, these guys do this. And in our case, if you flush the toilet, which is seawater, you'd see little sparkly guys come into the toilet bowl. But this was the whole sea. And so anyway, this guy contacted me, and he couldn't do it because there was cloud cover that night. So I have no proof that I ever saw this, and as far as everybody's concerned, I'm hallucinating. So anyway, then we went into Oman, and Oman, I don't know if you ever saw that movie with Tom Hanks. What is it called? Anyway, it's about piracy, where they commandeer a ship. He says,
Yeah.
"I'm the captain now." I don't know if you guys saw that movie.
Yes.
But there are pirates from here, starting at Oman and then going up through the Bab el Mandeb at the bottom of the Red Sea. There's a bunch of pirates around here. Pirates are a deal. I mean, what had happened right before what we did was we stopped at Oman and we put together a convoy, which is, like 5 boats that sail together. I don't know what good that does, but that's what everybody does. And that's a long story too. But anyway, what they had done is they changed their business model right before we got there. Because what they had been doing is getting on your boat and scaring you and taking your money and your radio and any valuables you had. That's what they had been doing. But a couple of years before we got there, they decided, hey, wait a minute, we can make a lot more money if we kidnap these people. So they would kidnap people and take them into Africa, and then they had it together so they could figure out where your relatives were, and they'd find your relatives back in Europe or the United States and ask them for $1 million. And they had the structure in place to transfer the money and then just get away out in the wilds of Africa. So that was a little bit scary, but anyway, it didn't happen to us. And one of the reasons it didn't happen is that what I'd been hoping for was bad weather. So if you have 15, 20-foot seas, how are you going to get from a small boat to my boat? It'd be suicidal. There's no way to do it. And so in bad weather, it's hard to kidnap people. And lucky for us, there was some bad weather. Also, it was right after 9/11. There was a bunch of warships around. This is the Maldives, you know. Like every place else, it was really hard on the eyes. It was terrible to look at all this destruction and unnatural stuff we had to endure. But this is also in the Maldives, and this is an anchorage full of cruising boats. And unlike most places, these guys are all world cruisers. They're all going around the world because there's no reason to be here unless you're circumnavigating. So we met people here that we stayed in touch with until we got to the Mediterranean. It was really a wonderful group of people. There was just something about it, you know, that all these people, and we all knew we were heading into the pirate zone. So that was in the Maldives. And again, here's the pirate zone. Here is Oman. These guys aren't dressed up for an occasion. This is how they dressed. This is the boat. This is our convoy leaving from Oman to head up to the Bab el Mandeb. This is a satellite view of where we are. So this is Oman up here. At the port is called Salalah, and then this is the Gulf of Aden. So we sailed down the middle of the Gulf of Aden through the Bab el Mandeb. This is Djibouti over here, and then up to Eritrea. And so Eritrea is down here. Stopped in Eritrea for a while, and then we were having engine problems. Terry and I both can do some mechanics, and we both thought it was a valve lifter because we heard what we thought was a tappet noise. So we get up to Egypt, and we had a mechanic come and look at it, and it turned out it was a spun main bearing. And so what that meant was the engine had to be disassembled down to the crank and that bearing replaced. And we're going, oh my God, we're going to be here for a year. But those guys got it done. And we were there 6 weeks. That was that was stressful because there's a language barrier. I've got to negotiate with these guys. I don't know whether I'm getting screwed. I don't know anything. It's a mess. Anyway, we got out of there, and then the engine didn't run anyway. And then we had to come back and negotiate with the guys some more. Anyway, we finally got out of there. This is in Hurghada. And then we were just about to head up the Gulf of Suez. So, okay. When we got up to Hurghada, what had happened was we ran into a dust storm in the top of the Red Sea, which is not uncommon. So Terry, I'm navigating. Terry's driving, and he yells down at me that he can't see anything. And we're in the middle of a bunch of reefs and all this, and plus we got a bad engine. It was very dicey getting up here. And anyway, we finally got up here and got our anchor down. And this picture was taken by some friends of ours on another boat who had come up on the radio and helped us con our way into this anchorage. And we were pretty relieved. So that is Egypt there in the background. And this is, so we did some sightseeing. This is the Nile. Those are feluccas, which was also a type of boat that was used by fishermen in the 19th century in San Francisco, a felucca. And this is, I like to call this the imponderables. Okay, now this is where we got to. This is Hurghada, this area here. Then we have to sail up the Gulf of Suez. This is the Sinai Peninsula, and over to the right is the Gulf of Aqaba. So we had to sail up here, and We got to the top, and you stop. You stop. Let's see if I got a picture. No, you stop at the. This is the Suez Canal. So right up here, you stop, and let me get a pointer to. Okay, you stop right here, and you get measured by a guy, a couple of guys. They come down and measure your boat, and then you pay them a bunch of money. Actually, it's not that much. It's, I don't know, maybe 500 bucks or something. And then you get a pilot. And this is a 2-day journey up the Suez Canal. And this is a picture in the Suez Canal. And we got a lot of stories about that. But one of the things that happened, yeah, the big guys are right there with you. One of the things that happened is our engine died, and it was an extension of the problems we were having. It wasn't really an extension. It was an unrelated problem that the mechanic had caused back in Hurghada. So our engine dies. You're in the middle of the Suez Canal with all this traffic, and the pilot was very calm. What he could have done, that we were very appreciative that he didn't do, was say, okay, you guys are out of business, and go get one of his friends with a tugboat and charge us $5,000 to get us out of there into a port. But he didn't do that. And so we were able to fix the engine and get going, get down the road, and he didn't say anything. He was just really nice about it. So this is an aerial view of the Suez Canal. This is Port Suez down here, and you come up to about here. This is a town called Ismailia, and then you stay overnight, and you get a new pilot for the next day. And then this is Port Suez at the top, and this is Alexandria. I can't quite make it out, but Alexandria is right over here. Okay, so we left, we went to Cairo, we did all that stuff, and then we crossed the Mediterranean up to Turkey, and this is Port Said in our rearview mirror. We also flew the American flag every place because that is nautical tradition, not because we were trying to be pro-American and in your face or anything like that, but that is what you're supposed to do everywhere. We never had one word said against us. I should mention that. After we were trepidatious about going up here and Lloyd's canceled our insurance, nobody said one word about. If they did say anything about it, it was condolences and support in the Muslim world. We never heard one word of hostility the whole time between Australia and the Mediterranean. This is Simi, which is an island on Greece. So we toured around Turkey for a while, and now we're on Greece, and that's here's Maverick tied stern to the quay in Greece, in Simi. I'm not sure I'm going to make it today, but anyway, this is the island of Delos. And I'm up on Mount Cynthus. Cynthus is supposedly the mountain upon which Apollo and Artemis were born. And so this is a sacred island in Greek thinking to this day. And it's not developed. In other words, you see all these ruins here? They don't have any t-shirt shops or anything here. It's all just left pristine ruins of the island of Delos, which is full of temples and old, now decrepit mansions and so forth. And this is the old port. This is a new port that they've built, the seawall, but this is the old port. And I don't know if any of you remember this from the philosophy class, but when Socrates was convicted, it was the night before. There was a delegation to go to this island here, Delos, to offer libations and prayers to Apollo. And this is the ancient harbor right here where the ship would have gone from Athens, from Piraeus to this harbor here. And also, this is a harbor from which the captain of that ship would have made the determination that, okay, it's time to go back to Athens, knowing that when they got there, Socrates would be executed. This is all, it sounds like a myth, but that's exactly what happened. Okay, we bounced through all of the not all of them, but a considerable number of these Greek islands, and then got to Athens. This is a replica of Odysseus's ship made by a guy named Tim Severin, who made this ship based on ancient plans and then tried to follow in Odysseus's track from Troy to Ithaca. And this is we didn't see this. This is a picture from that we collected someplace from a book or something. But that is the ship he constructed. This is the agora we visited in Athens. This is if some of you will remember this from the philosophy class, this was the prison in which Socrates was kept. And then you go through something called the Saronic Gulf. Athens is over your right shoulder here, and then up here to the top left is the Gulf of Corinth. And this straight line here is the Corinth Canal. And it used to be, in biblical times, there wasn't a canal there. They used this road so when you instead of going around the Peloponnesian Peninsula, you would stop on one side. This is how Corinth made their money. And they would transport your goods to a ship on the other side in the Gulf of Corinth. And this road still exists with the cart tracks still in it. This is now the Corinth Canal that you were just seeing an aerial view of a minute ago. And we've traveled on to Galaxidy and then up to the hills, this is Mount Parnassus, and this is the Temple of the Oracle at Delphi, Temple of Apollo at Delphi, and this is the ruins of it today. As I said in my philosophy class, I think, we asked that the Pythia, the prophetess there, whether we would be able to get home safely, and we were not given an answer. This is a artist rendering of the Temple of Apollo in its heyday at Delphi. This is Ithaca, the island that was ruled by Odysseus. All these places, they just seem like, what? This is like a mythical place. How could it actually exist? But it does. There's the Rock of Gibraltar. This is Maverick right here. I'm doing something, fixing something on Maverick. This is the Rock of Gibraltar. That is the Bay of Gibraltar, and this is a satellite view. So Gibraltar is only this little thumb right here. That's all it is. The rest of this is Spain. And to get going, because the currents and the conditions inside this channel into the Mediterranean is on your upper right and the Atlantic is to your left. The conditions here are not the same as they are outside, and it's a bit tricky to plan your departure. So we had to leave, I think it was about 1 o'clock, and there is the lighthouse, I think that's called Point Europa, and just the rosy fingers of dawn are just peeking out there, and that is the Rock of Gibraltar. Then we went down to Morocco, and then I think I can get this done if you just bear with me. I'm trying to rush through this, but we went to the Canaries and then and Morocco. So this is Morocco, an old Portuguese fort, and this is also Morocco. And man, that really looks Morocco-ish. I think you'll agree. This is Tenerife. That's not the island that Columbus left from was called La Gomera, and when we got to La Gomera, we had a problem with our the flange that holds the transmission to the prop shaft was vibrating. We'd had it worked on in Greece, and they screwed it up, and so now we were really. If it vibrates too much, what happens is the prop shaft comes loose and then screws itself out of the boat, and you don't want that. So Terry and I talked about this, and we were going to have to backtrack a long ways in order to get someplace where we could get that, where there was a machine shop, because there wasn't one where we were in La Gomera. And we talked about it a long time and decided we would just try to sail across the Atlantic without an engine, because and my argument was Columbus did it, and this is Columbus's Nina, is a replica of the Nina, which visited us in San Francisco, I don't know, 25 years ago. I went and saw it. It's way littler than you think it is. So like Columbus, we sailed across the Atlantic with no engine. We could run the engine, just not for propulsion. So we had enough. We could run the engine to run, say, lights and radio and stuff like that, radar. So there we are. The Canaries are. That's the Cape Verdes. Where are they? I can't. That might. Yeah, that's Canaries. So we're going from here to the windwards, and I can't remember how long it took us. Maybe 20 days, something like that. And Columbus did not know this existed. He thought he was going to Japan, and he was very lucky that the trade winds were blowing. The thing is, okay, here, the trade winds start at about 21 north, and we're at about 27 north here at the Canaries. So what I did was I waited till a gale was blowing from the north. So that's where we got our 20-foot seas. So, because otherwise we're just going to sit there for days and days with no wind. There's often no wind between the Canaries and the trade winds. So we rode a gale down to the trade winds, and then from there we could go west. And so this is some of the 20-foot seas we saw. Stories. I got some stories about that. Anyway, we had some trouble on the way across. Our wind vane broke, but we did make landfall in Carriacou. About 30 miles from Carriacou, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Terry wakes me up and says, "Hey, Tony, you should look at this. This is interesting." I think I've told you before, the last word you ever want to hear Terry say is something is interesting. It makes your blood run cold. Well, what's interesting, Terry? The bilge is filling up. Yeah, that's very interesting. In other words, the boat is sinking. So we knew the boat pretty well by now, and it took us about 10 seconds to figure out that it was not coming in any of the obvious places like through-hull valves or the rudder post or something like that, or the prop shaft. So that meant it was coming through the hull, and that was a problem. There was some kind of breach in the hull that was causing water to come in. So now we get on the, this is daunting, we get on the radio and no help. We couldn't raise anybody on the radio, which is kind of gives you an idea of how alone you are out there. So we couldn't reach anybody at all, and so we just started sailing towards, because we only had 30 miles to go, which may not seem like very far, but on the other hand, it doesn't take more than about 10 minutes for your boat to disappear beneath the waves. And we didn't know what was going wrong. There were some other ideas I won't go into about how we could have dealt with the situation, but we decided for the time being just to keep sailing. And when we got into the boatyard, this is what we saw. The boat had been cracking in half under the keel and mast. And this never happens. This is, and I could go into great deal of detail about how we think it did happen, but getting grounded back in Borneo didn't help. I'll say that. And somehow we made it here. There were so many things that could have gone wrong. The boat could easily. First of all, the conditions when we discovered this were benign. If we would have had 20-foot seas when we discovered this crack, we'd be on the bottom. You never see any boat like this with this damage because they don't make it to shore, but we did. We managed to make it into Carriacou. And then you got the problem of the people that are going to fix the boat. They've never fixed anything like this before because nobody ever makes it into port with something like this. But the sailing community is small enough so that I had references all over the place of people who would help me make a judgment about this. Now, this is all on me, though. When we left there, I had to trust that the boat was fixed. I had to use all my brains, what little there were left, to assess whether this was safe, because we're going to go into the Western Caribbean, which is very rough, and Terry's life is my responsibility. It's not just the boat and me, it's him. And Terry's an idiot, and he'll do whatever I say, you know. So I took that responsibility Terry's not the least of an idiot. I just mean that he is a faithful guy, and he will trust me. And I knew that. So if he thought I thought it was safe, he'd go with it. And I knew that, so I couldn't trust him to be the naysayer.
So, Tony, what did they fix it with?
Fiberglass. You know, I have pictures of the repair. They had to take about 6 to 8 inches on each side. This crack is about 18 inches long on both sides of the hull, right in front of the keel. And what they did is take a saw and just, they saw an area about this big, and then they cover it with multiple layers of fiberglass. And believe me, I was pretty paranoid coming from there to home, and I would, whenever I could, I'd dive on the boat and see if anything looked funny. And another way to tell is the reason this is happening is every boat, every sailboat, what it is like, if you can imagine a bow and arrow with your arm being the mast. The backstay and the forestay are very tight, like the strings on a bow, and they're trying to push the arrow through the bottom of the boat. In other words, the mast through the bottom of the boat. Every sailboat is like that. So every sailboat is trying to get broken in half by the tension between the backstay, forestay, and the mast. Everyone is trying to break in half, but they never do, except Maverick did. And I could go into, this is not a cheap boat, by the way. This was like, I would say this is on the level of a Lincoln Continental or something. It's not a Mercedes, but in its day, this is not some kind of crap boat that I have. So this is very, very unusual that something like this would happen. I've never heard of it. Anyway, so I want to move along here. We were in Carriacou over here. We were, of course, going to cruise the Caribbean. We didn't get to do that because we had to get the boat fixed. We went to Aruba and then to the San Blas Islands. This is Maverick anchored in the San Blas Islands. This is San Blas Islanders with a load of firewood from the mainland. Now, I just love this. This is the indigenous, they're called the Kuna, these Indians. They're the indigenous people of San Blas. What I love about this, first of all, this is a matriarchal society. And second of all, this is how they dress every day. This isn't ceremonial. They get up, this is how they dress. There's young or old. And let me just say one more thing about the ladies. What happens is, if you're prepubescent, when you first get your period as a young lady, this is really true. We saw it. They put you in a shack in the middle of the village, and everybody knows that you've gotten your first period. And you just sit there for a couple of days, and this is celebrating your coming of age, and and then after that, you wear this dress as an adult female. And we talked these ladies into taking their picture because we had a printer on board, and we took their pictures with their babies, and they were pleased to have pictures of their children. But that is just the most elaborate dress uh, to get up every day and look like that. It's just so lovely. This is the kids. You can see how obnoxious they were. Um, and you can also see that they do not have the ceremonial. The young girls there do not have the ceremonial dress on. Actually, it's not ceremonial. The adult dress. No, this is how they dress until they reach adulthood. And by the way, the guys never dress anything like anything but this. They just have shorts and t-shirts on. They don't get to dress like that. It's the ladies. And like I say, it's a matriarchy. This is a Panama Canal. This is how we are going to go through the Panama Canal. Maverick will be the middle boat strapped to two other boats on its side. I don't know how many of you sail or have been on boats, but I imagine you haven't spent too many hours with a boat strapped on either side of your boat. And yet, that's what you have to do. So I was in charge of not crashing into anything. This is how tight it is. I don't know if you can see these little guys here. These are called mules. And the way this is kept off the sides is these guys have ropes on them. Actually, it's more elaborate than that, but it's not computerized or anything. They do this all by eye, and these mules are what keep the ship from hitting the side. It's crazy. That's how it's been done since 1914. That's the last picture of the Atlantic, and this is us inside the canal. All very, very, very interesting. That's Maverick taken from a webcam. We were able to, again, you have a pilot, just like you did in the Suez. This is more expensive because it's more of a infrastructure. But anyway, we had the pilot call the webcam and make sure they got us a picture on the web. And that's Terry up on the Ratlins taking a picture of the camera, taking a picture of us. And this actually is a screenshot from back in the U.S. of somebody, because we alerted everybody on our email list we were going through, so have a look. Anyway, that's the end of the Panama Canal, and here we are back home again. I don't want to spend any more time on this, but there we are back in our home slip, home from the sea. That's some courtesy flags from other countries, and there you have it. So I'll stop the screen share. There we go. Okay. All right, guys.
Read the book. Read the book. It's really great.
Tony, what's the difference between a felucca and a dhow?
I don't know. That's a good one. That's kind of obscure, but you can. I mean, for me, it's kind of obscure. I know a lot of the other stuff, but there are really a million. Nobody knows when sailing was invented. I mean,
It's been
it
around.
existed obviously in Polynesia and in Arabia from prehistoric times, but we don't know how it started. And a dhow, and I could look it up. It'd be an easy Google thing. A dhow and a felucca. Don't know.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, that was great. By the way, Tony,
Great.
Euclid, Ohio,
Oh,
named after a scientist.
you sure it
And
wasn't named after Frank Euclid, the hardware store owner?
it was, well, I'll tell you, I got another one, competing AI, giving different stories. One said that Newton, Massachusetts was named after Newton, but another one said it was Newtown. So Who knows?
I think it's named after someplace in England, which itself may, but I'm not sure of that. But I don't think the town in England. I think it's Newtown, and I don't think it's named after Newton.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Newtown in Massachusetts too, whether named after the English one or not.
But
And then
Euclid,
there's
Ohio.
always
And
there's
Cambridge
this,
used to be called Newtown before it was Cambridge.
there's also Einstein Brothers Bagels in Los Angeles.
Most importantly.
Hey, so Tony, I just want to know, was it hard to come back?
No, this is the normal thing that everybody thinks is you're out in these lovely, pristine, natural societies in the most beautiful places in the world, which absolutely was the case. Every place we went was beautiful. But I have to confess, it's just my corruption as an American. I was, first of all, very pleased to have survived. We didn't know when we were in Half Moon Bay. I was still worried we wouldn't make it. That's the whole time. There was never a time when I wasn't worried for 2.5 years. I don't want to make it sound too dire or anything, but yeah, I mean, in other words, it was my job to be worried. Like, there's a lot of things to worry about. But when I got to San Diego, I went, oh my God, we're going to survive. It's going to be okay. And there was a guy whose boat got lost in Turtle Bay. So you don't know, imagine that. And we had, one of the ugliest things that happened was when we were crossing the Atlantic, there were two brothers on a boat, and one of the brothers got up in the morning, and the other brother was being dragged underwater by his tether and was dead. So bad stuff can happen out there. And another boat had to be sunk in the Atlantic because of this and that. So yeah, you're worried the whole time. So that is one aspect, Anne, is that when I got home, I was so relieved that we had actually survived. The second thing is,
By the way, Tony, that's sort of like raising children, just in case.
I don't have the guts for that. I mean, that's a whole other level of stress that I couldn't handle. No, I don't have the guts for that. But the other thing, Anne, is that I found myself, see, you get to these little islands that are just so gorgeous and beautiful and pristine and everything. But then you realize that it's just like living in, Lodi or something. It's a little town where there are old feuds from families. If you order something, it's going to be 6 weeks till the boat comes in with it. I'm spoiled. I get Amazon. I can get something the next day if I want it. There are great restaurants. I live, next to San Francisco, one of the greatest cities in history. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. We're so spoiled here, and I'm one of the people that's spoiled. And so there was never, I thought before I left, I'm going to fall in love with some place and just want to move there. That never happened, and I met very few other people it happened to. There were people in Fiji or Tonga that had moved there from Europe and were expats, but it wasn't a very common thing. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm just an American, a corrupted American person.
I guess I sort of just meant because the adventure's over,
Oh, that. No, I think it was. Listen, it was just the adventure. Every day was an adventure. That's not an exaggeration. It was exciting. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing to have done. But I had no desire to continue it. It is also stressful. That nobody ever writes about this in the sailing books, about how romantic it is and all that. But no, I mean, there's never a point when we were in a harbor in Greece. which was so safe. You go down this long channel and then you're in the middle of a town. There's just no way that. And the guy in front of me got hit by lightning, and it took out a bunch of my electronics. I mean, you're just never safe when you're on the boat. There's never a time when you don't have to worry about anything. So, usually sitting in my house, I'm not worried that it's going to sink. So I don't want to cast a pall on it, though. There was just nothing about it that I regret doing. It was all wonderful. It could have been so many horrible things, so that's another thing that occupies me. I think about some of the stuff that we did, and it just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, some of the stuff that where something could have gone just. I didn't tell you half of them, but something could have gone just this much wrong, and we would have lost the boat. When we came up the Red Sea, 100 boats came up the Red Sea, and 5 of them sank. That's not really great odds. And 1 person died. That's just in the Red Sea. And so, yeah, stuff happens out there that could be, your life could never be the same. So, yeah, it gives me, some of that stuff gives me the creeps, and I'm glad that young guy did it so that I don't have to.
That's great.
Anyway, I've kept you very long today. You can ask me more questions next time if you like, or email me, of course, anytime. But let's call it a day today. And then next time, let's see, did Leslie leave?
Yeah.
I think she's good.
Said,
she's good for Thursday.
I think that's my understanding. She'd be good. I'll try to email Leslie, and we'll get her scheduled for next time.
When would you like to do Crow if I can get a hold of him?
Well, we could do him a week from today if he could do that, and we could probably fit him in
whenever.
Like we got Brian lined up. We have hopefully Alice. We've already picked on Neil and Laurel, and we're going to continue to pick on Gerald and Doug and Julie. So we've got some backup, but I think, in other words, if he can't do it a week from today, we'll probably be able to think of something.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell him a week from today or any following Tuesday or Thursday.
Right. Yeah, and also, by the way, just we can do what Leslie suggested and just talk amongst ourselves.
Right.
And Barry wanted to do that too. I think that's great idea. So.
And I've still got my Supreme Court thing I can do.
Oh yeah, I forgot about your thing, Fred. We got to do that. That's great.
Yeah, good.
All right, everybody. We will see you next Thursday with Leslie.
Great.
Great. Farewell.
Thanks,
That was
Tony.
awesome.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.